Welcome to the Deep Dive. You've brought us a truly fascinating stack of sources today, all about Dongducheon. That's a city in South Korea with a really complex, layered past.
There certainly is.
And our mission for this deep dive is to pull out the most important bits of knowledge from these sources. We want to show how this specific place, shaped by, centuries of conflict and change, is now becoming this remarkable hub of Afro-Asian harmony through art, through community.
Right. We're aiming to explore some perhaps surprising connections, things linking big global historical events with very local community building.
Exactly. All designed to give you that aha moment and hopefully a shortcut to being really well-informed about this unique story.
And Dongducheon is definitely a place where history has left some deep marks. It's no longer just a military city, that label it carried for so long.
Right.
But it's now this vibrant ground where new communities are actively forming, shaping its present and future, really kind of defying those old narratives.
And its past is incredibly heavy, isn't it? I mean, even before the Korean War, you look back at the Japanese colonial period, Dongducheon wasn't just some quiet town.
No, not at all. It was actually a key strategic military and logistics hub for the Japanese Empire, for their colonial rule and expansion onto the continent.
You mentioned the Gyeongwon Line, the railway, connecting Seoul, Gyeongsang back then, to Dongducheon. That opened in 1911.
That's right, just a year after Japan annexed Korea. And it was later extended further north to Chirwon. Plus, there was the Gyeongwon-Zato Road, now part of National Road 3. That cut right through Dongducheon, too. And it was explicitly used as a central land route for moving troops, weapons, supplies.
So what kind of legacy did that create, being this sort of military crossroads?
Well, it fundamentally established Dongducheon as this nexus of power and movement, really setting the stage for even more conflict down the line.
Right. So after the Japanese defeat, it ends up near the 38th parallel.
Exactly. And then the Korean War hits. Just brutal experiences. The city became a central battleground, occupied and liberated repeatedly. Defense lines just collapsed again and again. Huge losses.
Wow.
Most of the infrastructure was burned or destroyed.
Yeah.
Massive civilian casualties, and just a huge number of displaced people. The city was literally torn apart.
So with that level of devastation, what happens next? How does it rebuild?
Well, just 2 years after the armistice, in 1955, the U.S. military steps in and establishes bases like Camp Casey right there in Dongducheon.
Okay.
And that completely transformed the area. What was once rural became this military city overnight. Base villages started popping up around Bosan Station.
And its location was key, right? Being close to the DMZ, but not too close.
Precisely. Only about 20 kilometers away. That gave them a bit more strategic depth, extended response time if there was a land incursion compared to being right up against the border.
Did they just build everything from scratch, or did they use what was left?
Oh, they definitely capitalized on what was there. The U.S. military utilized and expanded the transport infrastructure that the Japanese had initially built.
Ah, interesting.
So that legacy of strategic importance just continued, albeit under different circumstances.
So when you put it all together, this history of invasion, division, intense fighting, the whole Cold War scar tissue, it makes the fact that there's now a significant Biafran community there really striking.
It really does. How do these two seemingly completely separate histories actually intertwine?
Well, to understand that surprising connection, we need to trace another global thread. This one starts in West Africa with the story of the Biafran people.
Okay.
So Biafra was a self-proclaimed republic. It declared independence in May 1967, located in southeastern Nigeria, and primarily centered around the Igbo people.
Right. And that declaration immediately led to a brutal civil war that lasted 3 years. It was fundamentally about conflicts over political autonomy, especially for that oil-rich region. The Nigerian central government responded with force, and it escalated really quickly into a full-scale war. The estimates are staggering around 2 million deaths, mostly from starvation and disease, actually.
Oh, terrible.
Before the Nigerian government eventually won in 1970. After that, Biafra wasn't internationally recognized anymore.
But the roots of that conflict, they go even deeper, don't they? Back to the colonial era. Nigeria itself was, in many ways, an artificial creation of the British Empire, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Early 20th century, the British basically lumped together these diverse ethnic groups, Hausa Fulani, Yoruba, Igbo people with different languages, religions, cultures, into one administrative unit.
How did that colonial strategy, the manipulation, set the stage for later conflict?
Well, the British used a classic divide and rule strategy. They tended to favor the northern Muslim elites, concentrating power there.
Okay.
So the Igbo, even though they were often more educated and prominent in administration and commerce, ended up facing political exclusion. And after Nigeria gained independence in 1960, they faced retaliation. Their attempts at self-determination were often blocked by a central government still dominated by the Hausa and Yoruba. It left this really deep sense of marginalization.
But it gets even more complex. The Biafran War wasn't just internal. You described it as an explosion of these colonial-era imbalances, imperialist legacies.
Exactly. And then, adding another layer, the Cold War powers got involved. It turned into yet another proxy war.
Right. Who was backing whom?
You had countries like France, Portugal, Spain, West Germany supporting Biafra, and then the Soviet Union, Bulgaria, East Germany, and the UK supporting the Nigerian government.
Wow. It's a direct parallel to the Korean War, isn't it? Another Cold War proxy conflict.
A clear parallel, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And all these complex political interests swirling around meant that the international community was often hesitant to step in with humanitarian aid.
I see.
Even the International Red Cross found it really difficult to operate and maintain neutrality inside Nigeria. And it was actually this vacuum, this urgent need, that led to the creation of Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, MSF.
Really? MSF started during the Biafran War.
It did. Its activities began right there, born out of that specific crisis.
So let's connect this back. How does this global history of the Biafran struggle relate to people ending up in Dongducheon?
Well, when you look at the bigger picture, the settlement of Biafran descendants in Dongducheon, a city, as we've said, scarred by its own history of proxy wars and division, it really highlights something important.
What's that?
It shows how the legacies of colonialism and Cold War conflicts aren't just historical footnotes. They're still actively shaping where displaced communities find new homes generations later, often thousands of miles away.
Yeah.
It's like these past geopolitical games continue to draw these unexpected lines across the globe, creating new layers of diaspora built right on those old structural remnants.
And this connection, it's really embodied in individuals, isn't it? Like David King, he's the head of the IPOB, the Indigenous People of Biafra Korea branch. Yeah.
Exactly. David King. Born in 1971, so just after the war ended, he grew up being taught he was a descendant of Biafra, even though the state didn't officially exist.
Mm-hmm.
And that identity often led to discrimination, limited opportunities both politically and economically within Nigerian society. Made it tough to build a stable life.
So he comes to Korea in 2003 looking for work, initially just planning to save money and go back.
That was the plan, yeah. But he noticed there were hardly any Igbo people in Korea back then. He actually recalled thinking, you know, if someone from my community has an accident or dies here, I need to be able to help them.
Right. Practical support.
So he formed this community group called Hansi to support fellow Igbo people in Korea, just looking out for each other.
But what shifted him from just that community support role to leading an actual independence movement branch?
Well, tragically, in 2014, his younger brother died back in Nigeria. He'd been arrested for participating in a Biafran community festival. Yeah. And that very personal loss really propelled King into the independence movement more formally. That same year, he became the head of the IPOB Korea branch,
Okay.
which was initially set up in Insan, actually, a city known for having a large foreign population. He started actively seeking out other Igbo people, others from eastern Nigeria in Korea, persuading them to join the movement.
And then he moved to Dongducheon after a couple of years elsewhere in Korea.
Yes, he moved there partly hoping to avoid visa issues, maybe blend in a bit more. He found a community where Black residents were already more concentrated, and he thought, perhaps mistakenly, it might help them evade crackdowns.
I see. And now there are about 100 IPO Korea members living near Dongducheon.
Roughly, yeah. Around that number.
How does King view their presence in Korea now, especially since returning home isn't really an option for many?
He emphasizes that IPOB has a rule for its members all over the world. Respect local laws, make a positive impact on your host community. And that's partly driven by the fact that they can't go home easily. It creates this deep sense of responsibility to where they are now.
That's a really powerful way to frame it, especially given the discrimination they've faced. So how important are these community contributions for IPOB Korea, building trust in Dongducheon?
Oh, incredibly important, especially as a newer immigrant community trying to establish themselves and gain legitimacy. And they have specific examples.
Like what?
Well, during the COVID-19 pandemic, the IPOB Korea branch raised money and served 300 bowls of samgyetang, that Korean chicken soup to elderly immigrants in Dongducheon.
Wow, that's significant.
And another time, when there was a shortage of blood for transfusions, they immediately stepped up. Registered foreign members participated in blood drives. These aren't just symbolic acts, they're tangible contributions.
It really sounds like King feels a deep connection to Dongducheon now. You mentioned he said something like, Korean society has brought big changes to my life.
Yes, and that he feels a strong desire to contribute back to Dongducheon, a place where he feels he and his family can finally live safely.
That feeling of safety, of belonging, it really sets the stage for how art is now becoming this bridge in the community, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And building directly on that theme of connection and exchange is this place called Space Afro-Asia.
Okay, tell me about that.
It's an art space in Dongducheon, co-founded back in 2021 by Choi Won-jun, who's a filmmaker and artist, and Moon Siana, a curator and director. And their mission is explicitly to express the historical context of Africa and Asia and their relationship today through art.
What really strikes me is the location. Dongducheon, it's not the first place you'd think of for a global art space focusing on Asia-Africa solidarity. Why there?
That's exactly what's so interesting. The founders saw Dongducheon as this perfect microcosm of these larger global dynamics. They looked at its specific history, the U.S. military bases, of course, but also things like North Korea's past aid to African nations. They actually built structures, monuments, spread their Juche ideology there.
Really? I didn't know that connection.
Yeah, it's another layer. And then, importantly, Dongducheon today shows how capitalism took root in this place that was once a symbol of the Cold War, right on the front line. It's like a living canvas of all these complex forces colliding.
And Moon, the director, she had some thoughts on previous art projects there, something about objectification.
Yes, she made a really important point. She critiqued how past art projects about Dongducheon were often done by outsiders, were temporary, and risked just turning the residents into subjects, into objects of study.
Right, the parachute in, parachute out problem.
Exactly. So Space Afro-Asia's approach is fundamentally different. They are committed to deep community integration, to working from within over the long term.
How does that play out in practice?
Their commitment is foundational. It's about genuine collaboration, making sure residents' stories and experiences are absolutely central to the art. And you really see this commitment in projects like one called Welcome to My Funeral.
Okay, tell me about that project.
Well, it actually started with a different idea. The initial spark involved a Ghanaian Afrobeat musician named Nightingale. Apparently, he was quite popular back in Ghana. His songs even aired on state TV.
Wow. But he was working where?
In a factory in Korea. So the initial plan was to take his hit song, Holiday, collaborate with a Korean hip-hop artist, make a Korean version, produce a music video.
Sounds cool. But you said the project shifted.
It did, tragically. An African immigrant laborer died there in Dongducheon.
Yeah.
And Choi Won-jun, the filmmaker from Space Afro-Asia, got personally involved in helping the family navigate everything.
Oh, wow.
Things like embalming, body repatriation, incredibly complex procedures, especially if you're unfamiliar with the Korean system. It must have been an immense emotional and practical challenge.
I can only imagine.
And during that difficult process, Choi discovered that the deceased man's son, Tas, was himself an amateur musician, also working in a factory, but in a different city, Jeongju.
Okay.
So the original Holiday project got set aside, and instead they created this new song, Welcome to My Funeral, working with a Korean composer. And it featured Tas, the son, along with Nightingale, and a Korean hip-hop musician.
That's incredibly powerful, taking that grief and channeling it into art. What about the visual side, the music video? You mentioned fantasy coffins.
Yes, that's a really striking visual motif they used. It comes from a West African, specifically Ghanaian, funeral tradition where coffins are custom-made into shapes that symbolize the deceased person's life or profession.
Like what kind of shapes?
Oh, anything. A fish for a fisherman, a car for a driver, maybe a book for a scholar. In this video, they focused on ink-tip shoes.
Ink-tip shoes. What's the significance?
Joy explained that these particular shoes, with their distinctive pointed toes, are often worn by pallbearers in Ghana. But they also carry this echo of colonialism. They were originally introduced as a kind of European luxury item during the colonial era and became associated with status, with formal wear. So by featuring them, the artwork subtly weaves in that layer of history, showing how these colonial legacies persist even in cultural traditions and everyday objects.
That's fascinating. So the art is connecting death, memory, colonial history, diaspora, all in one visual language.
Precisely. It's a stark reminder, too, that seemingly separate struggles like the Biafran War's legacy and the difficulties faced by immigrant laborers in Korea today, they share these common threads of vulnerability, often shaped by historical power imbalances and economic pressures.
Yeah, it's art really bridging those distant legacies.
And beyond these really potent artistic statements, Space Afro-Asia also focuses on, well, maybe less visible parts of the community, like the crucial role of African immigrant women.
Oh, okay. How so?
They recognize that these women are often the pillars supporting families, maintaining community ties, but they're largely absent from public discourse. This led to things like a macrame craft workshop.
Macrame, like not craft. What's the cultural exchange aspect there?
Well, this is what's really insightful. Macrame techniques actually originated in West Africa and traveled to Europe historically.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. But here, in Dongducheon, you have a Korean instructor teaching macrame to African and Filipino immigrant women. Moon, the director, pointed this out as this amazing example of how culture moves and flows backward.
Huh. That completely flips the usual narrative.
It does. It challenges those linear ideas of cultural transmission and shows this real blend, this back and forth.
And the focus wasn't just on making things.
Not at all. While the women's finished pieces were displayed at Space Afro-Asia, Choi really emphasized that the process was way more important than the end products. He said the process of immigrant women sharing their stories was more important than the completed artworks themselves.
It's about the connection, the shared experience.
Exactly. And then finally, there's this other really interesting project, the Afrosia Girl Group.
Afrosia, tell me about them.
The name itself is a blend, right? Afro for Africa, Zia for Asia. It's a group of 6 young women, all born and raised right there in Dongducheon.
Wow. What's the mix?
There's a Ghanaian middle schooler, a Nigerian middle schooler, a Nigerian high schooler, and then 3 Korean members, all local kids.
Okay. Was this meant to be like a commercial K-pop style group?
You know, they apparently discussed a commercial debut early on, but ultimately the project really focused on artistic and cultural exchange. They released a music video, a song, but it was driven by what the students themselves wanted. It wasn't about chasing fame.
So what was the deeper purpose? What issues were they trying to address for these kids, these second-generation immigrant youth in Korea?
This really touches on a significant challenge in Korean society. Moon explained that because Korea isn't traditionally seen as an immigration country, these second-gen kids often grow up thinking and speaking entirely in Korean, but they're still often labeled as foreigners. And those strong friendships they build in school, they can just dissolve after graduation, leaving them feeling isolated, struggling with this kind of hybrid identity.
That sounds incredibly difficult, caught between worlds.
It is. So Afrosia's goal was really to create these ongoing connection points, bringing the Korean and second-gen immigrant youth together beyond just the schoolyard.
And it also gave the Space Afro-Asia team insight.
Exactly. A much deeper understanding of what this younger generation is concerned about, their school lives, their dreams for the future, getting insights into their unique experiences.
How did they create the actual song and video?
It was a 4-month process, really collaborative. The members co-wrote the lyrics themselves, and they learned choreography from a professional.
So a real creative effort.
Definitely. Choi was clear. This wasn't just some experience program. He called it an artistic achievement by the youth themselves. And more than that, a platform for Asian and African youth to actually imagine their future together.
Building a shared identity, literally from the ground up, not just for them, but maybe for the whole community to see.
That's the hope, I think.
Wow. We've really journeyed through Dongducheon's deep, layered history, haven't we? From this heavily fortified military stronghold to now this vibrant, unexpected nexus of diverse cultures.
Yeah.
We've seen how these huge structural legacies, colonialism, the Cold War, how they shaped both Dongducheon itself and the Biafran people, ultimately bringing them together in these really surprising ways.
And perhaps most powerfully, we've witnessed how art and these community initiatives, they aren't just, papering over cracks or bridging divides. They seem to be actively creating new identities, new futures for people building lives there in Korea.
What really stands out to you from this deep dive? For me, it's how this story of Dongducheon offers such a powerful microcosm. It shows how these massive historical forces, however distant they seem, can converge and create these surprising new communities, really challenging our old ideas about national identity and belonging.
It definitely does. And it leaves us with this compelling question, doesn't it? What does home truly mean? Especially when history, migration, and this idea of a shared future are constantly redefining its boundaries. particularly to those who are forging completely new paths in places like Dongducheon, a city built right on the fault lines of global conflict, but now somehow blossoming with this unexpected harmony.